It's basically like a fingerprint for a file. Theoretically, no other file will ever have that fingerprint, so that's what people usually use to name specific files against each other. That is going to be that's the actual referenced malware sample from that article from Talos on Camel Ground. So that's the exact thing that they're using. And so we're going to walk through the whole process of reversing it. So the first thing I usually do when I'm looking at something, especially when I'm in Linux, is I'm going to run file on it, just so I can confirm that it is an executable file, and then you're going to be like, what does UPX compressed? What does that mean? Well, sometimes, oftentimes, malware is actually packed. So what they'll do is they'll try to squeeze down their malware sample so it's smaller and has a smaller footprint, and then also it makes it harder for people to understand what's going on functional-wise just by looking at it. So that's a reason why people pack malware. So we're going to have to unpack that. But first, I'm going to use one of my favorite tools, PE-Frame, on this and get some info. And this takes a little while.
Does PE-Frame run it? Is that what it does?
No, it actually just looks at the PE header and then different artifacts of it, and it'll give you information. And I probably should have run that with less.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's on GitHub, so you can just pull it out from anywhere. It's really great. All right, so basically this is the compressed version. It tells you that there's a packer, so it tells you UPX. One great thing is that when you know the packer that you're dealing with, and these tools give you that, you can actually find the unpacking method pretty easily. Chances are, UPX has, and I know it does, has a really easy unpacking method. You just install the packer and then do the decryption method because it's a legitimate packer, but it's just using legitimately. Why would we know that this is a Python sample? Like this is a Python executable. You guys know? Can you guys see this?
Resources.
Big enough?
Resources.
Yeah. So there's like a lot of different references. So like right there, you know that it's something squishy right there, and that's really what it is. You can see that it's UPX just by seeing the names of sections, and that's a big marker for that.
So the other sections are UPX.
Yeah. And then you can see the import functions. Usually when things are packed, because go ahead. Oh, okay. Usually when things are packed, you'll see a lot less imports than usual. Computers are always trying to connect with other things, and it uses a lot of libraries from around the computer. So like when you don't see like a ton of those, you know that there's something up with whatever file you're using.
You know, when you're out in the wild, like, do you know what the actual file name was? Out of curiosity, like before.
Oh, you'll find out.
Okay.
Like, just shortly. I think I just need to scroll down.
Okay.
These are some of the calls that it does, and quick lesson in some API reversing. Get proc address is just to get the idea of where that process is. Load library is just to load other APIs. So when you don't have a lot of these APIs, you actually can load more in real time, and that's usually what's used. Virtual protect is a way that you can actually make it so that certain sections of memory are able to be used for execution or writing, and that's usually really good for malware people. They love it. And then exit process, exit process. So these are references to Python and all that stuff. And these are just strings that are found within the actual file itself. And then PE magic a little bit. This gives you a little bit of information. So that's the info that you're looking for right there. So that's the actual file name. And when you read the article, if you read the article, it actually shows as like a PDF, like it's actually attached to an email as a PDF, and it's trying to pretend to be one, but it has an exe extension. So it's trying to fool people. And you can see that with the product name, and then you can see the .pdf and .exe. So that's how people are going to do it, and it's in screen here. I don't even know what that means. Does anyone speak Spanish here? So that's really that's a really good way to just get a lay of the land. So now we know that it's malware. Well, we know that it's packed, and it might be malware. We know that it's Python executable. We know the original file name. That's something you probably want to know, just so that when you see emails coming in with that name, like that file name attached to it, you're probably going to want to be a little nervous.
Subscription.
Yeah, yeah. and then you got an idea or a sense that there's a little bit more work you got to do to sort of see what else is going on here. So what I'm going to do is unpack this bad boy real quick, but in order to preserve this, I'm going to copy that and go py2pxt sample, and then just do that. So like I just wanted to make a quick copy because when you do actually unpack it, it'll rewrite over the actual file. So to unpack a UPX file, you just install UPX. It's a known packer, and it's somewhat legitimate. Like it's freely available, and you use the /d option. And then whatever file that you want, and you run it, and it'll be like boom. One file is unpacked, and you see the ratio is that's how I guess compressed it was. And then now we have an actual file that looks like something. So let's look at this real quick. And let's see the difference here. So this was the original. It was 7.2 megs. And this is the new one, 8.8 megs. So you can see that it's just inflated. And now we're going to have a lot more information when we run stuff. But I like to do a real quick file just to make sure we know what we're doing with. And we don't see the UPX anymore. So that's good. And then PE frame. Oh, I should have done this. And so this theoretically is the same file, but uncompressed. So you're going to probably see more information because a lot load here, and it's uncompressed now. It takes longer to run. So we don't see the Packer information. Well, the Packer actually says it's Visual Studio C++. That's not great. What else do we see here? You can see that the resource information is still there. You can see a lot more information about calls. So now you see is debugger present, and debugging is a process of just stepping through code stepping through a process while it's running to identify problems. Usually malware analysts will do that to identify functionality so they can see what the malware is doing. So it's of their interest to not see if the debugger is running or anything like that. Create file, map file. So there's a lot of different options of these are all the possible. This is all the possible functionality that would be available to this malware sample. So this is way longer than the amount that we had before, and it's mainly because it's unpacked. So now that it's a little bit more clear, we can sort of make rough assumptions about the things that could be done with this.
Oh, well, I think you just said it. So all those they would have access to,
Yeah.
all those calls they would have access to, but that's not saying that they aren't using them.
Yeah, no. Like sometimes they're stuffed, sometimes they're not. Like sometimes people stuff stuff like this just to throw you off, but they don't necessarily have to call all this stuff. Like they just have it. They back it so that process is able to call out to those APIs. But we'll find out what they're going to do. They can't get away from this.
Is that derived from libraries now?
Yeah. So you can actually go to MSDN, and this is the basis of the cloud computer, like Windows-based malware. MSDN, look at these libraries, and you'll see what type of calls there are. You can follow it in the process stream. That's pretty much all I do is look up shit on MSDN all day. And then you can see like some virtual application and stuff. And then file name bound, this is going to be sort of all the same information because it's the same file. Oh, but look, there's URLs. Oh, Python, shout out. And that's probably because one of the Python files is in there, like the actual interpreter is in there. So I'm sure they reference their own stuff there. And then the same information as before. So now that we know that we have an unpacked version.
It has more fuzzy match though. It was 1 and 2 and 1 and 4.
Oh, nice.
Now it's 42 and 4.
Yeah. So like, and so now it looks like we have a better sample to sort of use as a rubric. So this is the sample. This is the type of sample that I would want to do some reversing on because now it's a little bit more clean for me to work on.
So what's that fuzzy match?
Fuzzy match is like, well, there's different types of there. I don't typically use them all that much, but like fuzzy matching was like, what is that? What's the hash that they use? What's the fuzzy hash that they use? They basically take sections of a PE file or an executable, and then they'll try to see like how similar something is to something else.
Okay, yeah, great.
Almost like that, but it's a little bit more
Like local high-low hash something like
yeah,
that?
yeah, like it's more math than I care to understand. Like it's not a direct, because like think about this, like you have Python malware and it does like one calls out to Google, one calls out to Twitter. Like those two files are never going to be the same, but they're very close. So you want to see the relationship. Because they're really close, they're going to have a fuzzy match versus like just doing that hash that I was telling you. As soon as you change one byte in that file, it's a completely different file in that signature wise.
Right.
So it's a completely different number. So the fuzzy match sort of helps with that. So it just tells you how similar it is to other things. I'm not sure what they use as their markers, but that's typically what the fuzzing, what they'll do. So the next thing we're going to do is let's look at the folder here. So we're going to want to take all those resources, just like when we in our walkthrough, and we're going to put them into this folder called ResApp. So what tool do we use to do that? Do you guys remember? It has res in the name. That's right, wres tool. And so we're just going to run wres tool and use the capitalized R to pull raw resources from this. And then you want to do all, and then extract, and then we're going to use pi to AC, and then we're going to do the out folder res, and hopefully, if we go into the res folder, we're going to see some cool stuff. And we do. So does this look familiar, the PyPLL and the PyScript? Now, PyScript is the moneymaker, like that's the main Python code. So theoretically, all we need to do is unmarshal that, and we'll get the PYC files. So we're going to do that. And we're going to use the script, the unpack Python script. And let's make sure I'm not going ahead here. Yeah, let's look at actually what we'll do is we'll see what type of file that Python script is. Just to drive it home. Now this is just a data file, and that's why it needs to be unmarshaled, because it's literally, it's like a stream of information, because the interpreter expects to just like serve it to the the interpreter expects it to be served to it, but it's not like a resident data file, so they're all like sort of clumped together.
What does that look like if you just text dump it?
I've never done that, so let's see. Oh, there's like little remnants of stuff, you see? Oh. So you'll see like a little bit of everything. So it looks like there's directory information, there's unzip, so that you actually see a little bit of this. Here. I wonder what happens if we do a move that. Let's go. Let's see what it looks like. It doesn't work. So, so basically, it basically is like hex information, but you see ASCII characters. So like you can actually read some of this, like Pi screenshot, boom, like you know some of the functionality right away. Client R, that's probably something interesting. Uppercase, that's not really that interesting, but you know that that's something that Python uses. So like this really, I've actually never saw that. And then you know that there's main.py too. So that's something, oh, well, we're looking for a file called main.py. So let's look into unmarshaling this guy real quick. So what I'm going to do is cat the unpacked. And so we're trying to talk about what this script really does. So this script just goes byte for byte, and it will just read in and unmarshal that stuff. It's really just a little bit of bitwise magic, and I think I stole half the code from somewhere, which people tend to do in Python products, so I'm not too worried about it. And it will basically push out the pi.c files that are inside of that Python script. So let's run it. And it's done. Let's see if there's anything new here. Oh, yes. So we have 3 pi.c files. And that is pretty interesting, because now we're going to see our first bit of Python code but let's make sure that we are dealing with what we're dealing with here. So let's go and see what type of code it is. So this is Python 2.7 by compiled piece of code, which is exactly what we're looking for. And theoretically, we can just uncompile and work with it. And that's exactly what we're going to do. Actually, let's see if I can. All right, yeah. So let's run uncompile. And go for the first one. And what I'm going to do is actually pipe this to the screen here because I know that this one's not the biggest one. But now you can see that this is what uncompile does. It just basically takes that bytecode, which was gobbledygook for all intents and purposes, and it pulls out to Python. Like, this is Python. And you can actually get the original file name from conroot.py, and then you can pull some information there. So
that's frequently where you see the username.
yeah, like in that path, that's where you're gonna see the username. They actually, it looks like they ran it inside their Python. Like, so they coded this in Windows, and then they ran it like inside. Well, I guess that's where they're but the interesting thing here is, do you guys see anything that would pull out when this was maybe made?
So,
What's that?
December 5th, 2017.
Yeah, there you go. So like that's pretty interesting because it keeps all that data embedded inside that file, and then you can sort of see some of this functionality. So message box, that's pretty cool. You know that it's popping up in message box. But this is not the Python file that we're probably looking for. This is not the big one here. So you think this is like more of a I guess like an auxiliary Python file. So let's keep going down the list and seeing if there's anything that is more interesting. So looks like this one was really small, and it basically was install zip importer. So it basically installed the zip importer. I'm guessing this is for probably data extraction, and this is just like a little help file that was there. So that's not really that interesting. But there's one more left. And we're going to probably cross fingers. I'm guessing this is going to be the main Python code here. And lo and behold, its name is main.py. And we can see a lot of different stuff going on here. You get a lot of imports. Do you guys know what that strings gen possibly is doing? Any Python people?
Generate random strings.
Yes. And why would people want to do that? The interesting thing is, like, I was like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever saw in my life, because they're literally just running it and it doesn't do anything. But when you're looking at it in memory, you're going to see a bunch of random data. It's actually going to be 2,000 bytes of random data shoved all over your program. Like, so when you're looking at it on when you're looking at in debugger or in memory or anything like that, like I will have to sift through all of that fluff in order to find the segments like, oh, import C types, that's dangerous. Install, that's dangerous. Base 64, that's going to be something interesting, because we know how to reverse base 64. Request, that connects out to the internet. And then Win32 compile, that's pretty bad. Like, those are the type of things that they're trying to hide. So that's why they're sending out those string generators, because when you're looking at it in memory, it's going to be hard to pick out, 10 characters when you have 2,000 just gobbledygook in between it.
So,
Yeah.
so basically, it's just a whole bunch of camouflage to cover up what's real.
Yep. It just
Oh,
makes
that's
people's
very-
jobs harder.
Why so much camouflage if you can just reverse it to here this easily?
Oh, because
Why
people,
even use that?
because it's bad guys are sometimes misinterpreted, and they don't really like. So a lot of times they're not. They know that us reversers are ninjas, and we're gonna figure out what they're gonna do anyway. So the battle is not between us. It's actually the battle is between their AV products. It's between automated IDS and all those. So the battle is with those machines that are the barriers to them getting the initial infection. They don't really care that we're going to figure out what they're going to do, because they already broke in and stole the coffee maker, right? So that's really the game plan for them. They know that eventually someone's going to reverse it and know, and the guy at Talos did, and now it's like, well known what they were trying to do, but like, purposes, they got on those computers. People clicked those emails, clicked that PDF, they got infected, and until someone down the line figured out what was happening, there was still damage done, and they probably had some bad gains from that. So that's really the name of the game, is they're trying to, it's a cat and mouse game. They know they're gonna get caught eventually, but they wanna get as much out of it as possible.
Well,
So the strings
they're
things.
not gonna call you in until somebody notices something.
Yeah, like I only hear about this stuff after the fact, and then when I was in instant response, I only heard about that stuff a little after the fact. So like it's just one of those things where if you can avoid the ADE client or some of the other, machine or software protections, then you're pretty much good. You're sitting around for a couple days or a couple months or a couple years.
Well, like,
before someone gets
some
you.
of the big, like the OPM hack and stuff, they were compromised for, what, 2 years?
Yeah.
Something like that?
It's crazy. It's
So,
crazy.
I mean, yeah, eventually someone, if they did something like this, would have gone and found it, but they had already pulled out data for 2 years.
Yeah. And when you think about it, like ransomware, you're gonna know right away when you're infected. But for like rats, they don't really. I mean, they're not gonna do things that are gonna sort of blow up their spot. So most of the time, rats can sit around for a little while. Let's keep going down and seeing what else we can do. And you guys can call out anything that's interesting to you. Threading, that's pretty interesting. Multi-threaded is pretty bad. More bad things faster. Get pass. Oh, that sounds pretty bad. And then there's one thing here, config, which will be pretty interesting. But let's try to find some functionality like you want to find a C2. Like you want to see where it's connecting out to, because then you can make snort signatures, firewall blocks that will protect your environment from these things. So let's see if we can find that here. We know that it can steal your screen because hide screenshot and image grab imported from the pill library. So we saw that when you asked me to do the hex dump, so that worked out really well. That just validates that it's doing that. It's multi-threaded again. That one's interesting. What do you think's happening there? Yeah, that's right. Harvesting. Not good. It looks like it's Chrome. It has Outlook functionality, network. Let's see. Return found passwords. This is sub-processing, so it's probably doing, it's getting GPU information, memory information. This is an introspection. A lot of bad guys will usually try to get stats on the computer that they're infecting because they want to know what other users are. And sometimes they trade that stuff around too. Get pass for the user. E-hidden. I think it's hiding itself in a directory, a certain directory. VM detect. So running in a VM, it's trying to find if it's running a VirtualBox or PC. So like this is a lot easier than trying to look at the assembly or anything along those lines. This is Python. Like you can see like all the stuff that's going on here. That's really great.
So when it's hiding in that there, does that mean the individual built this already knew the directory you want to hide in?
That is a way, that is a very cool.
Yeah, I don't know where, it might choose something at random, or it might be in the config. I'm actually not sure where it is. I tend to not really care because I don't work in instant response anymore, but that's something that you probably want to know. That's actually a really good artifact for when you're wanting to respond to this. You can sort of see some of the things that it's calling, like WI service and how it's getting the virtual VM detection information. UIDs are attributed to computers. They want to know what computer is running on what their computer they have access to. Oh, here we go. This is interesting. So you saw comments. So we confirm that there's comments in this. Ask server for instructions. What server do you think they're talking about? It's not my server.
Yeah.
I hope not, actually. Yeah, the C2. So basically, what are we looking for? Like, do we see any URL information in there? Sadly, no.
Well, no, but they're packing it all in a JSON that's getting passed up to them.
Yeah, and there's a big marker right here, config.server. So now, when we look back up and we say, there was a config up there, I'm not gonna go back because we're all
That right here, a config file where I have.
Yeah, so it did import config. So now we can hint that configuration is the key. Like they have a configuration file, and that's probably gonna have the good stuff for us. So keep a note of that because that's gonna be imported. And as we know from the talk, earlier in the talk, the imports are in the overlay. So now we need to go out and we know that there's more information that we need to pull out. So we know the functionality and we know the guts, but the goods, the really identifying bits, are actually in another section. We can go a little bit more. Now you know a little bit about the communication. Another big thing here is that like every single time you see this, you see base64, B16 encode. Now that's the encoding mechanism, so it's like basically like a translation, and it's well known, and it's in a Python library. So chances are, if whatever we're looking for is encoded, we can probably get rid of that and figure out what's going on there. Expand environment variables, and we can keep going down. There's a lot of other pieces of information here, but for all intents and purposes, this is a rat, and it does ratty things. And if you guys want, when I post the blog, it'll have like all the links and all the stuff. You guys can follow through it and read through it, and that's a good exercise just to see like the type of things that these guys are trying to do. So we already know that there's some piece of information that we want, and actually I can do. It's not. And it is. There we go. It's right here. It is import config. So we're going to pull that out of the overlays. And to do that, we're going to have to go back because the overlay is actually a part of this file. And as you know, it's the extra data that's added on top of the executable file. So now we know the goods are in that file. We need to go back to it, pull out the information, and then we're going to use our favorite tool on compile6 and get it again. So to do that, we can use a program called, or a script called getOverlay. And basically what this does is it uses PE file just to see when the overlay starts, and then it just pulls the data from there. It's really easy. This is really small, and PE file is really fun little library that you can use in Python that just basically gives you full control over the executable, especially like a Windows one. So PE frame uses that a lot to pull out a lot of that information. So you can actually pretty much make your own PE frame if you wanted to. So we're gonna run that against the Python exe example, and then we are going to pull it out. And hopefully I think that's done. Let's see if we got anything new here. Yep, so we looked, and it looks like we have the .app. So basically it just made that. You can see that it is 6 minutes big. So basically there's a lot of overlay going on that executable. And so 6 minutes. And so let's try to figure out what type of file that is. We could use our handy dandy file. Oh, that's wrong. And that's a zip file. So we just basically need to unzip it here. And so what I'm going to do is unzip. And then I'm going to pass it over to that over and out folder, and then you can see a lot of good stuff. We can see some ICOM, you can see some select Unicode data, and these are a lot of stuff. But then is there anything up the top that's interesting? The moneymaker config is in there. You can see Outlook, which I remember stealing Outlook credentials. You can see network, it was stealing network information. You can see Chrome. So all of those things were in import functionality. So you can directly just go through, and all of those extensions are PYC files. So you can go through, run uncompile, and see how all of that stuff's functioning. We're really caring about the config. So, because I like CTUs, and that's basically what makes money for me. So we're going to go through and we're going to try to uncompile that CTU information from the config. So let's see if we can find this guy right here. There we go. All right. let's run, what is the tool? On compile 6. That would be the most useful thing if you ever have to deal with this. And run it on config. There we go. And let's use less so I don't have to make file. And wait for it to.
I think the command might have been mistyped.
Yep, that's right. There we go. That's faster. And we see. And the interesting thing about this is that you could see when it was compiled. I didn't even notice that recently, but it was in January 11th. And this actually came out. They said that they started seeing it in February, so that time frame sort of works out. What else do we see? We see the strings randomization, and we see the more of that fluff going on. Is there anything else interesting here?
Servers.
Yeah, and what do you ponder those values are?
Private IP addresses.
Yeah, so those are the addresses, and they may not be IPs, but now we have an idea of what's going on there. And then you can see that that's the method of it decoding it, so we can actually just steal that data. And then you can see sort of some of the information that it's using to try to help with their schemes. Let's see if there's any other information here. Actually,
Is it masking itself as a Java update? Is that what it's doing?
I don't know what this. Oh, it's making a service. That's a Java update. I think it might have injected itself into a service. I'm not sure what it did. I did this like a month ago,
Okay.
so I don't remember a lot of it. And then you can see that there's help information, so that's very nice of them. And a lot of that. So the really important part here is server. And so what we're going to use is Python to unPython their Python. If I can copy this. And I think it'll be really easy to get to this if we just import base64 like they did. I'm just going to copy their code. Might need to copy that out. There we go. All right. And so we're going to just take this, turn it into a list. Let's see if I can. All right, so now we'll go into Python, import base64, little copy pasta. So basically what it is I'm just taking that, basically exactly what they have, that list that they had in there, and we use their code against them for as in server. I'm going to print s. Well, oh, actually, no, I got base64. Base64 B16 decode, which is exactly the code that they use to decode theirs. And then S, which is each one of those guys, plus a new line. And if we press enter, boom, those are the CTUs for the malware. So basically this malware will choose one of those, and you can get that from the random choice stuff that they were doing, and you basically have the connections. So if you were to be like an incident responder or anything like that, you'd want to make sure that you're blocking these if you have an outbreak of this in your environment, because when they can connect out, you don't know what's going on in your environment. Screenshots of things like when people are using their bank accounts, passwords could be going out of there. There's a lot of information that can be going out there. So that would be number one thing there. And that concludes my presentation. And I will post like a little blog. I actually have like a couple like little quick screenshots and all that stuff so you can follow along, and I'll post like a link to the sample or something like that. So you guys can have it. And that should be on there. But to sort of bring it back, let's talk about what we came up with. So going through the whole process, we were able to find a lot of information throughout the discovery phase. So the original file name, like you got it right in the bar, like that's the initial entry point into the environment. When people see that file name, they should be able to know that's bad, right? The 4 command and control servers are going to be our URLs are going to be really important. So that's what you're going to know to block on your firewalls, your WAFs, your IDSs, like a lot of those web proxies. You want to know if it generates random data. That's going to make it a little bit harder to detect, especially with your security tools. So that might be something you want to be aware of. Its functionality, so we know that it steals credentials from Chrome, Outlook, and a bunch of other places. You know that it can hide itself. You know that it can detect if it's in a VM. It's multi-threaded. It grabs hard drive information that was just in that big file there. And it can take screenshots, and there's also a help ending because they're great guys, right? So that's really a good set of data that you can run off of. If your employer was like, tell me about this malware, and you came back with that, that's a job well done. So that is the end of the talk, and if you guys have any questions, feel free to ping me, or if you want me to show you anything. There's a lot of different ways to get involved in CHSM Sec. We're trying to be more and more involved, and I hope we're pretty constant at this point. We've been knocking it out. At least once a month we're having an event, so that's pretty cool. We have a Twitter, we have a website, and that has a blog, and that's going to be where I'm going to post. I'm going to be posting a blog with all of my steps, so you guys can run through this. Just try not to go to those URLs. I'm pretty sure they're down right now, but those are like actual bad guy URLs, so just be wary. Like do it from Kali Linux or something like that. Like follow my
Just
steps.
do it from the work computer, right?
Yeah. If you want your IT guy to be pissed. And then we're also on Meetup, so feel free to ping me on there. I'm always busy, so it's very hard for me to answer a lot of people, but someone will. Yeah, so if there's any questions.
Did you or the Cisco team or whoever set up like a host file to just redirect on a sandbox machine to spoofed servers of those CNC servers so you can see what specifically they're sending out?
Oh, we can see what they're sending. We can use that Python. You can just pop it into a script and do it to whatever you want. So it's pretty easy to get that. But my company does like DDoS stuff, so we don't really care too much except like just to get the C2s. It's because we have like a bunch of little blinky boxes in a lot of big places, and that's really all we care about. So like when I'm dealing with like something like this, I usually don't spend too much time. Like DDoS bots, like things like where people are doing DDoS, like
Like when Git got hit recently?
What?
Like when Git got hit?
Yeah, but we actually did so the Akamai is our major competitor, and they were like, oh, we stopped a 1.3 terabyte DDoS attack. They didn't. It was down for 10 minutes, and we stopped a 1.7 terabyte. But we don't disclose our clients because we're badasses. So not to be a hater, but
Out of curiosity, did you see what the C2 was giving the script?
oh, when the C2 was giving a strip, you'd have to emulate the traffic. The C2 data is going to be on the C2. So typically for DDoS bots, what I'll do is I'll make we call it a replicant, which is I would basically
In the case of this, you can basically see it's going to and click it in plain text. Did you check to see what kind of information?
No, I didn't try too hard because our clients won't our protections won't ever help against this. Like we don't have endpoint protections or anything like that. We're not network traversing.
Okay.
We have large data flow, so it doesn't really help us. The URLs we can stop on, but we can't stop on the local data.
What's more out of curiosity than anything?
Well, I can show you some of the C2 traffic. I or not traffic, but like what it would be and how you would go about it. What was your question, Mike?
But that was my first part of my question, and I was also wondering, like, are these, you know, are they sort of like, is this like one, you know, an individual or a group that say they write the malware, they run the mail servers, they run the web servers, they're doing it all, or is this sort of like different groups and like each person sort of like, where they're working with each other, they're paying each other for services, like how's it
All
all
of the
working?
above. But for this particularly, honestly, I think it's one of the like kids.
Okay.
Like I don't really think this is really big. I mean, you don't see a lot of traffic from it. Like I made a YARA rule for it, which is basically a way for you to characterize malware samples really quickly. Like instead of running PE frame malware, you'd run YARA and then malware, and it'll tell you, oh, this is bad guy. And I don't really see it all that often. I actually don't even. I think I saw like 5 samples in total. I think it's just one of the students at school, and we only saw it in that Brazilian school. So like I don't really think it was a big one. But there are like big infrastructures like that.
So how did they find it?
What's that?
How did they find it? Brazilian school.
Oh, they're probably a client of Palo Alto, or no, it's Cisco client.
So on a one-off like that, how likely is it that they registered the domains with their info?
I don't know. Hold on. I can actually tell you. Hold on, just a second.
Do it
What are
in
some of these domains?
It's like KMPD or
It's in your PowerPoint.
Oh, it is. You're right. CamDVR. Oh, actually, I think I looked at this before. CamDVR was like an actual like pop site or something. I think CamDVR was like it had a bunch of different subdomains to it.
Yeah, I saw 2 of them were in the,
Hacksuit.
Yeah, we don't have internet. Never mind. JK. But I think there was. I'm not sure. Like, it's hard because for these like one-offs, you don't get enough data for you to like really formulate a really good hypothesis on like what the person's deal is. Like we sometimes you get lucky and you can see that person bouncing about a crap somewhere, and then it's like, oh yeah, I made this and there's that, and then that makes it really easy to see their intentions. But sometimes like for these one and dones, like that kid, like it could have been a kid that was upset with his school or something along those lines and trying to do it. Version 4 just might have been him working on it for the past year and just iterating because we only seen 2 versions actual like in wild, and we just know it's version 4 just based off of the metadata from the config. So those are the type of things that sort of tip you off to it.
I assume the answer is no because the overlay file is compressed, but would you be able to run strings or anything on the original executable without URLs?
No. Well, you might be able to find the base 16 encoding of them.
Yeah.
Those probably are in the. I don't know if they are or not because the bytecode representation. But if they were in plain text, you might be able to. Some of the data is. It just depends on the compiler. So like PyDC deciding what it wants to make clear text and what it doesn't. Yeah.
So you know those URLs, I mean, assuming they wrote other programs that were reaching out to the same servers, is there a way you can quickly identify or scan an executable for those URLs now?
No, what you have to do is you would have to either scan it for those base 62 strings or base 16 strings, and if they are in plain text in that, and I don't know if they are, I can try to see if they are.
I mean, that's what I meant, the base 16 strings, but would scanning be an effective technique?
Oh yeah, YARA actually, the YARA tool that I was telling you about, it's basically like a strings matching. So like literally you just pop it into YARA and then it'll tell you based off of like a whole logic tree of, oh, does it have this string? No. Does it have this string? No. Does it have this string? So that's usually how we deal with it. Some of the things that you'll see is URLs oftentimes, if they're not obfuscated, you can see that they're doing it, especially for like these turn and burn small time stuff. Like you'll see URLs because people are lazy.
That initial executables UPX.
Yeah, if you would have to un-UPX it first, yeah. And then also, and then I don't know if VEX would cover the overlay, would it? Does it encrypt the or compress the overlay? I'm not sure. But and And then you'd also, there's like mutexes, which is like a way for different processes to know what's running what. And then also there's like a bunch of other strings. Like sometimes they'll put things like F you or stop reversing me or something like that, and you'll get some of the funny stuff like that. So like you can use those as signatures. And there are actually some examples. I'll show you. Oh, I don't have a picture. Never mind.
Some messages to Brian Krebs.
Yeah, like that. Like we have a bunch of
S.E.
samples.
Krebs.
So like that's usually what you want to do. It's like it's not rocket science. It's just time and just knowing the techniques. When you know people's motivations, like us identifying like from like the imports, like the type of things that are happening, and then seeing like snippets of information, then it's just working around your theories. Like, oh, you saw Pi screenshot when you ran XXD to look at the hex. Like, all right, let's confirm that. And then we looked at the source code and we saw that it was doing the screenshot. So like, that's a theory confirmed. And you just keep doing that until you have a good picture. And sometimes you won't. Like a lot of my analysis, I'll just rock out until I'm like, okay, this is enough to sort of block this. I don't really care what it does after that. Like the functionality beyond that is just like it's not really. It doesn't really matter. Bad guys are gonna do bad things most of the time. Any other questions? Awesome. How'd you guys like it? Was it informative?
Yes.
You guys excited to see the